The Denver Broncos have made a shocking selection. No playmakers for the offense just yet because Jahdae Barron, the DB out of Texas, he's coming in to form No-Fly Zone 2.0. We're going to tell you all about it on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Denver Broncos drafted a playmaker, but he happens to play defense. So the defensive backfield, which already includes the defensive player of the year, one of the team's best breakout players of the year, one of the biggest free agent acquisitions on the team, they're now getting another boost because Jahdae Barron, the versatile DB out of Texas, is coming in to join this already dominating group. Welcome into today's episode, Locked On Broncos. I'm Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com.
I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports.
And together we bring you the best Denver Broncos podcast out there. And today's Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Cody, I know you're there right now, boots on the ground at the Broncos facility. What's the vibe there as the Broncos have made arguably the most shocking selection they could have possibly made here in round one?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a shocking pick just because I don't think anybody expected that, right? We were all on board at the NFL train, as Shawn Payton calls it. Everyone was thinking offensive player. We were looking at how the board was falling in, here at the team facility at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. And we were thinking, okay, hey, running backs, wide receivers, the Broncos are going to have a wide variety of guys to choose from here at the 20th overall pick. There were some potential talks of maybe trading back, teams wanting to trade up, but Denver stayed put at 20, and they went. It was a shocker. We didn't expect Jahdae Barron to be the pick here. But, I mean, here's the thing. Because it wasn't the expected pick, you know, you see a lot of different reaction. I think the fan base right now, you're seeing some excitement. You're seeing some, wait, why did the Broncos do that? And I think both sides are valid here. But it just goes to show that maybe the Broncos right now, they view, as we said, they view their wide receiver room higher than most people think. They could still add a quality running back at this point in time. So we don't know how the board's going to necessarily fall there. They could still get a guy in rounds 2, 3, or 4, whoever it may be, however it may be. But going with the cornerback, clearly they want a playmaker on the defensive side of the ball, a guy who's got complete versatility. He can play outside. He can play inside the slot. He can play the safety position. We caught up with him on a conference call just 5 minutes after he was drafted. And one of the things he told us is he's willing, he can't wait to just learn whatever position they want him to play. And he's going to embrace that role. And obviously the ties there with Vance Joseph makes sense considering that Vance's cousin is down there at Texas. But the Broncos getting an extremely good player, but I don't think this was the player that anybody was expecting them to take.
No, you and I had talked about this, I think, a time or two previously, just kind of thinking through every scenario as we had plenty of time to do so between free agency and the draft, but certainly was one of those scenarios that felt like it was on the sort of back burner of options, very much so, because I think a lot of folks didn't expect Barron to even be available at this selection either, which you kind of get that vibe as the Broncos, like you said, they not only pass on wide receivers like Matthew Golden, who was still available, but they also passed on Omarion Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina, to make this selection happen. So you strengthen a strength. The Broncos, they spent a lot of money on defense and free agency. Now you use another first-round pick. Cody, it's not the first time the Broncos have made fans really upset. Everybody's got their heart set on Ohio State offensive guys, and then they turn around and they take a cornerback, right? It's kind of a deja vu from 2021 a little bit.
Yeah, no, it is. But here's the thing, too, and it goes back to we heard from Shawn Payton in the pre-draft press conference just last week. And one thing he said is what he believes helps a quarterback, a strong running game. But he mentioned a defense. He mentioned the defense as much as, being an asset to a guy like Bo Nix because, how do you keep, your quarterback out of third and long situations? How do you get your quarterback to stay on the field? Well, hey, get more possessions. And I feel like the Broncos clearly felt like in this situation here, at least, that, okay, hey, when Riley Moss went down with the injury he did last year, it put the defense in a tough position with Levi Wallace. And of course, we got to see a little bit of glimpse of Chris Abrams-Drain. I know you're going to talk in depth about that a little bit later on here on today's show here. But for me, it's like, okay, hey, maybe they viewed this as we need to be able to shut down opposing offenses. The Broncos are going to play a ton of really good offenses this upcoming season. You get Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga. Now you get Jahdae Barron, who's going to play inside outside. I mean, Riley Moss plays inside outside. Jaquan McMillan can play inside outside. So you're adding versatility to your secondary. which is crazy. We're going to hear, as the time we're sitting down recording this, Sayre, we're going to hear from George Payton, Shawn Payton here in a few moments. And then obviously I'll share my thoughts with you when we do a bonus episode tomorrow. But ideally, this is one pick that I know Broncos country is split on. I would say this to Broncos fans. This is a terrific young player, great head on his shoulders, captain-like mentality. He's going to bring instant value to the defense right away, even though it's not the pick in terms of offensive playmaker that Broncos country wanted. Don't be mad about the pick. Don't be mad at the player, because this is a terrific player that Denver's getting.
Yeah, it feels like one of those sorts of selections where it's upsetting because you can't see the whole picture in focus just yet, right? You want to see the whole draft class to really appreciate the value of getting a guy like Jahdae Barron in round 1, because we don't know what the Broncos are going to do in rounds 2 through 7, whatever it ends up being, the picks that they end up collecting there. Because we don't know that, it can be a little bit frustrating at this point, but at the same time, you're getting a really great player at a valuable position. Like you said, down the stretch last year, we saw this position kind of hurt the Denver Broncos a little bit. And so it's not like they were an overabundance of guys at the cornerback position. Certainly not a position you're worried about with the young guys that they have to develop, but a player where you can't look at and say, well, no, we can't upgrade the talent there. It feels like you had an opportunity here, especially knowing that you got great background on this type of player. Broncos are kind of addicted to Texas defensive backs these days, aren't they, Cody?
I mean, if you played at Texas, you got a great chance of being a Denver Bronco. But here's the thing with Jahdae Barron. When you look at it, he's appeared in 57 career games when you factor in regular season, postseason, 8 career interceptions, 24 career passes defensed. He's a good tackler, over 226 tackles. I mean, and he's just he's a great human being. He's a great kid. And look, this is one thing that Broncos head coach Shawn Payton and GM George Payton want to bring into the locker room. They want to bring in guys who are great teammates, captain-like players, high football IQ, love the game, study it at a high level, but also guys who can make plays on the field. And I think when you're looking at today's NFL with the offenses, and obviously we saw the Cincinnati Bengals offense, they've loaded up there, and Denver's going to play some, as I mentioned earlier, some really good offenses this season. How do you counteract that? Well, you got to have a defense that can be able to match that. And the Broncos, they have a plan in place, even though they made this move here in the round in round number 1. They have a plan in place to where I think they're going to add players that are going to make this offense better, right? They believe in the evolution of some of these other guys taking a step forward. Now I'll say this, because we're still here on night 1 of the NFL draft. If Denver somehow comes away with Travion Henderson in round number 2, Sayre, I could see them trading up from where they're at in 51. I could see them trading up to be able to get a guy like Henderson. If that happens, I'm very excited. This is an exciting pick for the Broncos, but if they get an offensive playmaker here in round 2, that's going to be another exciting element that I think will factor into the equation.
Absolutely. And we're going to find out. We're going to discuss kind of those next ideal moves for the Denver Broncos, as well as where Jahdae Barron fits into this secondary equation with some of the other guys the Broncos have there. But Broncos country, we appreciate you so much for making us your first listen of the day every single day. You don't want to miss out a single episode of the show. So go ahead, hit subscribe. And we're going to talk more about this pick, the shocker from the Denver Broncos. Where does Jahdae Barron fit into this loaded secondary? You'll find that out next. Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Here's how it works. You post your job, which is LinkedIn's brand new feature that helps you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder that 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Where does Denver Broncos first round pick Jahdae Barron fit in a loaded secondary? Well, his arrival might mean some bad news for Jaquan McMillan. I'm going to tell you why that is on today's episode, Locked On Broncos and Broncos Country. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day every single day. And now we finally have some picks to react to. If you're not already subscribed, you're going to want to be, because we're going to be covering every single pick, every undrafted free agent, every trade roster move that gets made over the course of the weekend. So take a couple of seconds, hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can get Locked On Broncos alerts every single day. It's really helpful. So the Denver Broncos taking Jahdae Barron, 20th overall, one of the biggest surprises of the first round of the 2025 NFL draft. There's no doubt about it. The Broncos, they did pass on Marion Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina. They passed on Travion Henderson. They missed out on Emeka Egbuka, who went one pick earlier to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then, of course, we saw Matthew Golden go 23rd overall to the Green Bay Packers. So this really makes us wonder, what role is this guy going to have? If he was so good that you had to have him, he better be playing right away. That's the prevailing thought, right? Is that, I mean, we're not going to be necessarily happy about this pick right away. Not everybody in Broncos country is going to be happy about it. That's for sure. So this guy's got to play right away, and he's got to make his presence felt. I think where he makes his presence felt immediately is in the slot, playing in that nickel spot on the defense, which is currently manned by Jaquan McMillan. And Cody and I have talked about this before on Locked On Broncos, but Jaquan McMillan is one of those guys that you kind of maybe highlighted, you kind of circled a little bit when you look at the depth chart of this Denver Broncos team and you say, okay, what starters could realistically be upgraded in the 2025 NFL draft? McMillan was one of those guys, because you saw a little bit of a decline from him last year at times, giving up some big plays and penalties. There were opportunities for him to make plays that just didn't happen. And when the Broncos needed help, when they had an injury at the position, it wasn't necessarily McMillan who stepped up in that spot. And so really, when you looked at that spot on the defense, when Riley Moss went down, it was kind of interesting. The Broncos didn't immediately put McMillan on the outside, even though there was maybe opportunity to do so. You want to get your best guys out there, obviously, and the war on attrition affects every team differently. But McMillan is one of those players that you felt like Cody mentioned in segment one, can play inside, can play outside. And as badly as the Broncos were struggling on the outside, maybe that versatility wasn't exactly what they thought it was going to be. Now, should we completely write McMillan out of a starting role? Absolutely not. But Pat Surtain ain't going anywhere, and I don't think Riley Moss is going anywhere either. I know there's a lot of folks that are cool on him after the way that last year went, the way that he came back from that injury and obviously struggled a little bit against the Cincinnati Bengals. But I mean, those receivers that the Bengals have, they're paid a lot of money now. They're really, really good at what they do. So a little bit of tough sledding for Riley Moss down the stretch after the injury last season. And of course, now that he did deal with an injury last year, that is 2 straight years that he's dealt with an injury. So maybe the Broncos really just felt like they needed to hedge their bets with this selection of Jahdae Barron. He had 5 interceptions last year. And like we mentioned in the first segment, he's played kind of all over the place. One of the really interesting comparisons that I've heard for Jahdae Barron as it relates to the NFL and what he's going to be able to do, there's 2 players that I've frequently mentioned: Brian Branch of the Detroit Lions and Cooper DeJean of the Philadelphia Eagles. You kind of see the way these guys are used as they play the slot. They kind of play a hybrid safety type of role. They can play outside corner. Really what they ultimately do is they're kind of force players near the line of scrimmage who they can do a lot of different things for you and cause havoc in a lot of different ways. A player like this is going to shrink the field for opposing offenses, going to cause quarterbacks to have to make quick decisions with the football. And this is a guy that can capitalize on those quick decisions. Like I mentioned, he had 5 interceptions just last season, and he's the type of player that with 4.39 speed, he is going to be able to match up with anybody in man coverage. A really, really interesting dude as well. He's just got a great mindset about him where he kind of feels like he has a sixth sense for playing defensive back. You go and watch any interviews that he did in the pre-draft process. You talk about how he cross-trains in different sports and things like that. he feels like these other sports that he's played, these other activities that he's done sort of give him that sixth sense to where he doesn't even necessarily need to look to one side to feel what offensive weapons are doing. And that gives him such a huge advantage to have that high football IQ. We know the Broncos covet those types of traits. We know that they covet those types of players who, man, they just know what they're doing out there. They're going to do their job really well. That is valuable to this team. Adding to a secondary, and when you're in a division that now you have three really good quarterbacks you got to go against for 6 of your games each year, and then you got to get through the gauntlet that is the AFC in the playoffs if and when you make it. If you're the Denver Broncos, there's nothing wrong with adding to the defensive backfield. Now you've got Pat Surtain, Jahdae Barron, Riley Moss, Chris Abrams-Drain coming up and believing that he can play a role going forward. You've also got obviously Jaquan McMillan still on the roster, and then at safety, you added Talanoa Hufanga when Brandon Jones already had a great year for you last year as well. So really, really interesting pick by the Denver Broncos. I think everybody would be way more excited to see, hey, who's Bo Nix going to be throwing more passes to, or who's Bo Nix going to be handing the ball off to. But George Payton did say in the pre-draft process that they felt like this draft was particularly deep at running back, defensive line, and others have said, the tight end class, very, very good. The wide receiver class, it's deeper than it is top heavy. The Broncos are by no means done adding to this roster, and Broncos country, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. The next most obvious move for the Denver Broncos after taking Jahdae Barron, it's obviously to take playmakers and get some more help around Bo Nix. Going to tell you who they might target on day 2 of the NFL draft here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of Locked On Broncos is brought to you by our friends FanDuel. And the NBA playoffs, they're here. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you will get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. And FanDuel makes betting easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props, from 3-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many different ways that you can bet your favorite player props. And after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out on these amazing deals that FanDuel's got going on right now. Head over to FanDuel.com, especially as the NBA playoffs are going. Lots of fun stuff over there. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. The next move for the Denver Broncos could not be more obvious as they took a defensive back in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft. The Broncos need to go get playmakers for quarterback Bo Nix, and it probably starts at the running back position. But Broncos country, this is a deep class at the offensive weapon position groups: running back, wide receiver, tight end. The Broncos could go a lot of different directions on day 2, but I would be shocked if they didn't go running back with their top pick in the second round. We're going to tell you all about who could be available after round 1. A lot of big men going in the first round of the 2025 NFL draft, and the Denver Broncos. Not a lot of folks are too excited about the idea that potentially the Broncos are building the best defense in the NFL, because right now we all really covet playmakers, and that is exactly what I feel like the Denver Broncos are going to do on day 2 of the 2025 NFL draft. But thanks once again, Broncos country, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. We really appreciate you. And look, this is a huge situation for the Denver Broncos, because obviously there's not a lot of playmakers currently on the depth chart who are super proven. Of course, Courtland Sutton is the primary guy. We saw a nice second half breakout last year from Marvin Mims, and then Evan Ingram. He does what he does out there at the tight end position, but the Broncos have not done anything this offseason at the running back position. They have not done anything at the wide receiver position, and those 2 spots absolutely needed to get upgraded. Not to mention, the Broncos probably need another pass catching option at the tight end position in case Evan Ingram does miss any time. But at 51 overall, and potentially even seeing the Broncos move up, you never know what they could end up doing there. I think for sure we're going to see the Broncos go for a running back. And TreVeyon Henderson, he could be available. I think the Broncos will obviously look at potential of his teammate, Quinshon Judkins. You wonder, could they go after somebody else like Caleb Johnson out of Iowa? Could they make a surprise selection? Not a lot of folks talk about DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. There's definitely going to be options on day 2 for the Denver Broncos to take advantage of a deep running back class, but obviously division rivals going after some of the best backs in the crop, with the Los Angeles Chargers taking Omarion Hampton off the board, and the Raiders early on Thursday night going after Ashton Genty. The second and third rounds have to be all about adding playmakers. The only real disappointment right now for the Broncos is that they weren't able to trade down from that 20th overall spot and accumulate selections on day 2, because now you kind of look at what's left in this class and you kind of say, well, shoot, the Broncos could probably go after a number of future starters for their offense with what's still available. And that wouldn't be shocking at all if they are able to come away with 2 guys on day 2 of the draft, offensive weapons that end up being starters for this team down the line. Now, running back is really the primary concern at this point for the Denver Broncos. George Payton, the general manager, Shawn Payton, the head coach, they talked about it throughout the pre-draft process. Like, they are going to get running backs in this draft, or at least one running back in this draft. And we saw the Broncos bring in a wide variety of guys for pre-draft visits. So I don't think it's just the second round that they're going to be interested in going after somebody like that. But I do feel like that's kind of the sweet spot, because those are the players that they brought in for pre-draft interviews, the top 30 visits, where they brought in guys like TreVeyon Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson, DJ Giddens, and a number of other players. That really feels like the range where the Broncos are kind of differentiating those guys with, hey, we brought these players in. What's really important in those pre-draft visits is that, can you diagnose the information that we're giving you? If we say, hey, you're our starting running back this weekend, can you handle the information and the installation of the offense and all those sorts of things? I do believe that's what the Broncos were kind of trying to differentiate between those running backs that they brought in. So I feel like it's a very, very strong chance that we see one of those backs that they brought in for a top 30 visit. I think the Broncos will draft one of those guys on day 2. But the plot thickens a little bit, right? Because Missouri wide receiver Luther Burden, he's still available. Iowa State wide receiver Jaden Higgins, he's still available. LSU tight end Mason Taylor, still available. So there's a lot of guys still available as we enter day 2 of the NFL draft here. And there's a lot of options for the Denver Broncos. Now, is this a deep enough class to where Shawn Payton and George Payton are going to feel like, hey, we don't need to necessarily trade up. We don't need to trade up to go get somebody. We don't want to sacrifice our other pick to specifically go up and get somebody. You can't help but wonder, though, after you didn't take a running back in round 1, does that desperation sort of start to ramp up here? There was a report by the Denver Post, Luca Evans, before the draft that the Broncos still really like Audric Estime, 5th round pick in last year's draft, who they had a 3rd round grade on. So there's no reason to write him off yet. Jaleel McLaughlin still on the team. Tyler Bidet, Blake Watson, those guys are still on the team. But it certainly doesn't inspire a ton of confidence at this point, right? It's not one of those situations to where you feel really, really good about the quality of the offensive playmakers. You're taking a huge leap of faith at wide receiver with Troy Franklin, Devon Vele, and even Marvin Mims to a degree, because you have to kind of involve him the same way that you did last year. And building upon that, you need to see progression from these guys. You're relying heavily on Evan Ingram, who hasn't really stayed healthy as a professional very consistently. You're relying on him staying healthy at this point. You're putting a lot of pressure on Courtland Sutton, once again, to be the guy out there that's making plays. And yes, you can add playmakers at different junctures of the NFL draft, but now the Broncos really, really have to nail it. And they not only have to nail it, they have to go and make sure that they get instant impact guys. It cannot be a situation to where you're saying, hey, 2-3 years down the line, this guy could be something. These guys that come in, they are going to have to play immediately. They're going to have to make an impact immediately. And so that puts a lot of pressure on George Payton and Shawn Payton now, because they've basically said with the selection of Jahdae Barron in round 1 that they feel really, really good about the development of their young guys. And they feel like they're going to get more out of them than maybe a lot of folks in Broncos country believe they're going to. But this is not a time to be kind of just tiptoeing around the issue, right? The Broncos were one of the worst teams last year in the NFL in efficiency in terms of running the football. Javonte Williams led this team in touches for 2 straight years, and the Broncos have not had a 100-yard rusher since Jerry Rosburg was the interim coach late in the 2022 season. Latavius Murray has the latest 100-yard game rushing for the Denver Broncos. This team hasn't had a 1,000-yard rusher in years. This Broncos offense has not had a featured weapon in years, and I say that with all due respect to Courtland Sutton, because we know that he's made big-time contributions, but those contributions have been in stretches and patches, not necessarily over a consistent period of time. You can't go into a game each week for this Denver Broncos team, regardless of who's been at quarterback, and say Courtland Sutton is going to be that guy that goes out there, 10 catches, 150 yards today. We know what we're getting from Courtland Sutton. We know that we can feed him the ball and we're going to get great results. Actually, his quarterback rating when targeted last year took a substantial drop from when Russell Wilson was the quarterback in 2023. So whatever the Broncos plan is at the offensive weapons right now, it's very much dependent on faith. It's very much dependent on their belief in coaching, their belief in scheme, their belief in progression, their belief in, and that's fine. That's great. But we all want to see it. And we all want to see competition for these guys on the roster, because yeah, you can bank on progression. You can bank on player development. That's totally fine. But why are we not drafting talented guys when they're available, when they're sitting there? A lot of Broncos country's upset about not drafting Omarion Hampton, and they'll be rightly upset if they miss out on guys like Judkins and Johnson and Henderson and all these players in round 2. That's going to be very, very frustrating for the Denver Broncos fan base if they're not able to pull something like that off. And so day 2 is essential for this team to add playmakers for Bo Nix, to at least give us some ideas on paper of who can actually help this team offensively, where the Broncos had issues upon issues last year. We were calling Bo Nix quarterback 1, running back 1, wide receiver 1. It was embarrassing at times. And so progression, player development, that is great. I buy it. I believe in it. But I also buy drafting talent and drafting guys who are playing at positions that you desperately need help, where you struggled badly, especially against, when contrasted against a team like Buffalo or Baltimore in the AFC right now, where they just have playmakers seeping out of their organization somehow. The Broncos don't have that luxury right now. Too many targets for Adam Trautman, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Lucas Krull, Jaleel McLaughlin, Javonte Williams. Those are the guys that you cannot be featuring in your offense. You need to upgrade the talent significantly. So that will be my soapbox. Even though I do like the Jahdae Barron pick, I think the Broncos, obviously, they're in a position now where their backs are against the wall. They are backed into a corner. It's do or die time on day 2 to add playmakers for Bo Nix. But Broncos country, you're going to want to subscribe if you're not already done so, because tomorrow we're going to give you a bonus episode recapping exactly what the Broncos did do on day 2 of the NFL draft. And you can catch us every single day here, Locked On Broncos. But we appreciate you so much, Broncos country. We'll see you on the next one.